So, the next speaker, Ian Jarvis, he's that very interesting mix of being interested in IT, working in it for many years, and also a body therapist. And Ian has spent many years going over to India and working in clinics with the survivors of the 1984 Bhopal chemical leak, which was an incredibly awful disaster. But today, Ian's going to be talking about 5G and also smart cities. So I'm hoping to be enlightened on those things. Thank you. So a big hand for Ian Jarvis.
Thank you, Helen. Hello, everybody. I can't see you from the stage here. So I've got a couple of things down here for later on, and one of them shows what we are sitting in at the moment, and that's an important thing, as you'll see. And this is a little bit about me, just to give a bit of credibility, because I suspect most of you in the audience here, were looking through the leaflet and the flyers in Nexus magazine and thinking, who the hell is Ian Jarvis? It's not one of these big names that everybody's heard about. So that's me anyway. And this is a joke. It's a good joke. It's quite an old joke. Give you time to read that and assimilate it. But like all good jokes, it actually makes some very serious points. And the reason I put it up is because I don't really discuss these points in this talk, but it is something that you should really, really be aware of, particularly for our children. It talks about, we see the young man on the left there, clearly addicted to his smartphone and probably to coffee too, by the looks of that hand on the cup. And she's in a situation of social isolation. Social media is not about getting together in communities like this. It's about isolation, isn't it? So that's the real message, and it's something that every one of us needs to look seriously at for our own purposes. Are you addicted to your smart tech? So we put that on the side for a minute, and I want to show you a couple of quotes from where have we gone here? We've gone something wrong. Okay. All right, we'll skip that little bit for a minute. So let's have a look at the rationale. When I was preparing for this talk, the reason why we've got this slight situation here is that I was I don't use Microsoft Office anymore. I've got it. I use LibreOffice. And I'm transferring it this morning, and last-minute updates. I didn't make all the changes to the PowerPoint one, so I may have to improvise a little bit as we go along. But that's all right. I'm used to that. So what's the rationale behind all this 5G that the government is actually pushing? Because it is a government agenda. The government is pushing it. I read a lot of planning applications, and in every single planning application, you get the quotes like, we are following the aspirations of the government. This is government policy. It has to be done. So those are the sorts of things. That tells me all the time that that it is a government and a national policy. But what's behind it? It's this, isn't it? Where does the climate emergency step into it? Well, I remember it started with global warming, yes? I remember when I was a little boy, I used to go onto the beach. If I go and walk on those same beaches now, and I walk up to the edge of the seashore and feel the waves on my toes, it's pretty much in the same place as they were when I was a kid. Have you noticed that? And yet every 10 years for the last 4 or 5 decades, we've been told you've got 10 years before all the coastal cities in the country will be underwater. Well, haven't we? And there's never really been a good definition. What is the definition of this climate change? Climate's almost changing. We can all agree about that, can't we? And now we've got a climate emergency. How is that defined? And I'm sure you're all thinking now, well, what's that got to do with 5G, Ian? Well, this is what it's got. They're all getting on the agenda. All the 5G companies are getting on that same agenda. And in a minute, we'll have a look at whether those claims that they're making there actually hold any water, whether they stick up to a little bit of evidence. But for the moment, I want to point this out with the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. I always get that one wrong, IEEE. This is what they said. It's a bit of inconvenient truth for those three comments above it, isn't it? I want to give you a couple of quotes from telecom industry itself. This is what we found. Jane actually found it in one of the teams working around the country with me, and she found this quote in a planning application to put up a 5G mast. Notice those words in red. Notice the last one in particular. I think that's the most important one. Where's the agenda? What's an agenda? Is it anything like a conspiracy, for example? Did they ask you? They didn't ask me if I was happy with this agenda. They didn't lay the agenda out and say, here you are, Ian, this is it. And look at this one particularly. This is from Ericsson. Ericsson is one of the biggest manufacturers of all the equipment that you see going up in the streets at the moment, all the electronic equipment going up now. And you notice, again, those red words. I put them in red. Ericsson didn't. This is actually in a paper about 6G. And what is it they say? They want to virtualize all aspects of your life. Do you want to be virtualized? No. And what about that communication? Do we really need Ericsson to help us with our communication? How have we been managing for so many years? Incidentally, I've got some little slips of paper here. Most of the URLs that are on the slides are on this piece of paper, or you can just take a copy, a photo as we go along, if you prefer that. I like to put the URLs on so you can see it's not just been making this up. It really is from an Ericsson article, because you've got no reason to believe what I say at all, have you? But looking back at those three claims that Ericsson and Huawei were making, is it green? Well, let's have a look. I want to go back a little bit in history, because we were something like this. Imagine this centuries and centuries, millennia ago. I apologise for the people back then had clothes on and were doing Tai Chi, but I do talk to all sorts of different audiences, so bear with me for a little bit. But you'll notice also, this is Goldilocks conditions. I know one of the speakers used that term a little bit before. Science does use that term. Not too hot, not too cold, pretty well in balance. Look at those two yellow boxes there, and you'll notice that the Schumann resonance, which was discovered or calculated for the first time around about the 1950s by Professor Schumann, and our alpha rhythms are pretty much in sync. Now, given all that we've got around us, is that random? Do you think that would happen random? It actually gives me a lot of confidence, because either we were made for this planet or this planet was made for us. I don't know which one it is, and it doesn't matter really what your philosophy of life is. Those things are still true. That gives me a lot of confidence. But round about 200-300 years ago, we started inventing electricity. And that started to change, rolling on. And within a couple of hundred years, we went from that to this. And that is just a small part of what we're putting around at the moment. I actually did this slide probably 10 years ago, actually, when I started talking about this stuff. And I've not updated it since then. So I could add loads more things to that as we go along. The figure of 100,000 satellites, we've not quite got there yet. There's about 10 companies around the world, mostly in America, putting up the satellites at the moment. They're not big satellites. You know, it's sort of the size of a fridge, so I'm told. I've never actually clapped my eyes on one. but they are going up day by day by day. I think we're probably up to about 30,000 possibly now. When all this started, around about 2018, 2019, there was probably a couple of thousand up there. And I did read, and I actually saw an announcement on Rwanda. Yes, Rwanda is planning to put up another 300,000 of these satellites. Now, you might ask what interest Rwanda has in it, and that would be a very valid comment and question. I've not researched it, but I say I did see a guy make an announcement about it on behalf of Rwanda, so it's got some credibility. Who's funding it, and where's it coming from? I've no idea. But they're all going to be bumping into each other like dodgems, I think, up there. But looking at this, how do these claims actually stand up? Well, the first thing I want to say to you is that one 5G base station, we're not calling them monopoles anymore, we're calling them base stations because they've got all these cabinets around the bottom. This is what the telecom call them now, base stations. They used to call them monopoles when they first started putting them up. And one 5G base station uses 4 times the amount of electrical power, electricity, than a 4G mast does. 3 times. That is equivalent now to about 40 to 70 average domestic residences. Every single one. And that's now. Once we've got all the Internet of Things and everything that's connected with that, we have a lot more coming in. It will at least double, maybe even treble or more than that. So, is that green? And then when we've got all that, this next slide is a horrible slide. I apologize in advance. Don't even bother to read it, but it makes the point that what they're calculating, the telecom companies, they're missing all these things out. They're not even including their own offices that they use to do all their admin and to develop the tech. If you ever go online and look at Ericsson does some TV, radio sort of things, and when they're interviewing the techie people, look behind them and you'll see thousands of pounds worth of equipment, every item using electricity. And of course, there's another thing. You'll see that right at the bottom. This is the difference between LibreOffice and PowerPoint, I'm afraid. The heating effect, we're always missing out. Now, if we're in a climate emergency, and I've seen the weather charts, just as you've seen the weather charts, all this heat coming around. Now, waveforms are, radio frequency waveforms heat. They heat tissue, and that's admitted by the IEEE, the telecoms themselves, and also the standards makers, the ICNIRP, as we'll come on to that in a moment. So it's actually heating the air. It may not heat the air up much, but in a big conurbation, that could make a difference. And I'm sure most of you have seen those cabinets at the bottom, walk past them casually, and you can hear this, can't you? Yeah, it's a cooling fan. So it's blowing hot air into the atmosphere, and it's going to do more of that in the summer than it will in the winter. And again, it could raise the temperature by 1 or 2 degrees. It sounds not much, but 1 or 2 degrees in a heat wave can make a difference of life or death to some people. And if there's a climate change emergency on anyway, you know, with that electricity I told you about a minute ago, plus the heating effect, how can our council say, on one hand, we have a climate emergency? Ian, in the winter, don't turn your heating up, put another pullover on. And then on the other hand, they're rolling out these pieces of equipment which are burning up electricity and also heating the atmosphere. How is that making sense in any way or use of the term sense? There's a simple equation here, at least I think it's simple. Bit equals what? Basically that means the more data that is transferred, the more electricity is used. And with all these devices that we're building and bringing out, we're going to have much more electricity, much more data, much more electricity. So is it green? Well, there's another type of green here as well. There is a standard, there's a guideline and a standard, and this sentence is in pretty much the first or second sentence of that thing. So it says for humans. Now, it doesn't even mention any other forms of biology or life forms whatsoever in that 45 pages of that document, which is the international guideline. What does that mean for something like this? This is an island just off the coast of Netherlands. It's a bird colony, and one day the nature wardens were walking around and they noticed a lot of the dead birds had died, lying on the sand and so on. They leapt fairly quickly to an assumption: it must be bird flu. Now, these birds are actually sandwich terns. They're migratory, so they spend their winters down in the coast of Africa. Now, wouldn't you think that if this was bird flu, then every colony, certainly in Europe, where they're flying and they're mixing in Africa and they're all coming back again, they'd all be dead, all the colonies would. And yet there was a couple of colonies inland in the Netherlands where one colony was devastated, another colony 20 kilometers away or so was not. They were all lying. The same happened in France. You know, there were colonies in different parts of Europe that were not a million miles away from each other, where one colony would suffer some loss, maybe not as drastic as on Texel Island, and another colony nearby wouldn't. So do you think it could be this? Well, there's several scientists, among them Arthur Furstenberg, who've done a little bit of investigation about this. And I know some of you don't like Arthur Furstenberg because he's got funny views about climate change, maybe. But I like to say, you know, all scientists have got their skills, and they maybe have their bits. You know, they know what they know, and they think they know what they don't know. So I give them a break. You know, when they're talking about the stuff they do know about, let's give them a break. And Arthur does know about this stuff. So there are four really things that we need to notice, or we found out about, checking on this one and others, and other ones as well. Other places where amphibians who have been on the planet for billions of years are dying off, seemingly with no evidence whatsoever. But the first thing is that this is an area of shipping. So there's a high radio frequency traffic. But before that also, when there's a big change, it affects a population hugely. And just before this incident happened, and the months before it, there were about 18 new masts put on that island. 18 new masts radiating mostly 4G signals across there. And secondly, with all this traffic, the shipping lane, and lots of traffic, so traffic matters. Traffic makes a difference. So there'll be ship to ship, ship to shore, shore to ship, lots of monitoring going on, lots of radar over the area, and probably a lot of the sailors ringing home saying, hey, I'm going to be home. We're docking in a couple of hours, so you know, get dinner ready or something like that. Yeah. So lots and lots of traffic. And where there's lots of traffic, you get lots of radiation, and that itself has a lot of effect. The same would be true if it was in a big conurbation, for example, like the West Midlands, where I live. So that was two of the things. The other thing is that the territory matters probably more than distance. If there's a big hill between where all the radiation is emanated, the masts, say, where they're coming from, between that and something else, like a colony or a village, then it's sheltered to some extent. Here, it's just a flat sea, and it can actually reflect some of the radiation even more, so it could actually build up the traffic, the seeming traffic, even more than that. And the other one, a lot of this, it also comes along with 4G. So we have to ask the question, the difference between 4G and 5G at this stage, because there are plenty of other evidence of 4G having a major effect. Mount Nardi in Australia. The wardens on the nature research there, when the 4G towers were put on the mountain, they noticed biodiversity dropping down quite quickly after those masts were put up there. It's been well studied. The other study is one by Diana Cordas, who noticed on where she lives on her island of the Greek island of Samos, that she noticed suddenly a few years ago didn't seem to be as many insects around as there were. So she started an observational study there and kept a super record of the insects disappearing on that planet. And I'm sure some of you, like me, are of an age where you can remember having to stop during the summer every few hundred miles in your car to wipe all those dead insects off the screen. When was the last time you did that? I've not done it for years. Not for years. So we don't notice these things. We're not thinking about those things and the reasons why maybe they are not, everything is not as well investigated. Why did these people suddenly leap to bird flu? Maybe it was external influence or something. So we're not thinking. And this is England, just. It's actually called Pentrehydra. It's a hill, mountain, if you like, in Shropshire on the Welsh border. By the way, it probably used to be a Welsh hill. It's now an English hill. And on that, they are planning to put, or there's an application in for a 4G mast right up the top there, on the hill, right next to that wood, which is a classified ancient woodland. I looked this morning, it's still waiting on a decision. I put in an objection to it. Lots of other people that I told about it have put objections in. Because this is a national issue. It's not just about Shropshire. It's not just about Pentrehydra. It's a national issue. These are going out all over the place. And that's part of our work at the moment. So there are many, many other things that make this not green. This is just a long story that we could get into: electric lithium batteries and the bursting of flames. And they do burst into flames. My neighbour has some solar panels, and a few mornings ago, a couple of months ago actually, doesn't time fly? It burst into flames one morning, and they can't put them out. Electric vehicles are now being banned on some ferry lines. I do have to do this, though. I'm sure some of you in the room are saying, "Oh, yippee, techie stuff." And some of you are saying, "Oh, no." Well, I promise I'll be kind. It's not very tech. It really isn't. And as you can see from the colour of my beard, I'm not the latest geek, am I? So let's go into it first. We have a standard. It's what we do, isn't it? We develop standards. Drive on the left. There's a speed limit, and so on and so forth. So this is. We created an organisation called the International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection. It's not really international. It's not really a commission. And it's not much about protection. Some people have said it's more of a symposium than it is than a standards operating body. And we all know what a symposium looks like, don't we? Sometimes there's just a little bit too much agreement. But at least we say it's a symposium here. So there's a few things that you might like to know about this organisation. It is a private company. It's registered in Germany. Nothing wrong with that. And it actually sets a guideline. It doesn't set a standard. And it says if your government chooses to accept our guideline as its standard, then your government is responsible. And anybody who introduces that and uses that is responsible. So it admits of no liability whatsoever. There's another problem as well. It's based on this 6-minute single exposure. And does that represent what we're in today? I should imagine there's quite a lot of people out there with their mobile phones on already. So we're all being exposed to more than one mobile phone, and for a lot longer than 6 minutes. And incidentally, that another aspect of it was you wouldn't use it for more than 6 minutes in a day, and you probably wouldn't use it for more than 30 minutes in a week. How many of you don't use your phone for less than 30 minutes a week? Yeah, I thought not. Well, some of you maybe don't have a mobile phone, which is great. The heating effect, that was a theory based on what scientists called Schwann, Mr. Schwann, maybe professor or doctor or something, in 1953. So that theory is 70 years old. It's been disabused, it's been proven totally incorrect many times since then. I think most recently by Leif Sulford, a Swedish scientist. And the final thing that's wrong with the figures that they use, and incidentally, what they say is, if this is the exposure level, this is our recommended maximum exposure level. If your exposure level is less than that, they say it is unlikely that you will suffer harm. And they use that word unlikely in the paper. Not a very scientific word, is it? No, not really. So the final thing is the size of the head. They use a plastic model head in order to measure that radiation and put a foam near it. And it's based on those guys. Now, they're big men, male. Again, male testing. Of course, everything's male tested, isn't it? And it's representative of maybe 3% of the population. So almost every man in this community is not represented by that 3%. Almost every single woman, and certainly every child. This is a 3-year-old child. And you see the difference. It also ignores the fact that the tissue of that 3-year-old child is very different to my tissue at 75. You know, the brain and the fluidity of the brain particularly, the skull is thinner, they're smaller, they're developing. All these things are really, really important aspects of what's going on with this. And finally, it ignores International Association for Research on Cancer. I'm sure some of you will know this. Classified EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, as 2B carcinogen. That's possibly carcinogenic. 2A is probably carcinogenic, and 1 is definitely carcinogenic. And even then, there were scientists who were saying it should be definitely carcinogenic, and certainly there are more and more saying that now. And even recently, James Lynn has come out. He used to be on the panel with ICNIRP, and he's come out against the standard completely in recent years. If you type in the name James Lynn, you can find his articles on the site, on the web. There's also not very much about cumulative, because I want you to realize that we're not just talking about 5G. They say, oh, Ian talks about 5G. You know, I talk about a lot more than 5G, actually, but it is a good marketing tool, as the industry has proven. It's been a really great marketing term. The cumulative effects, we have not had, as Erica Mallory Blythe, a UK doctor, has said, we have not had yet a generation of people who have gone from natural birth to natural death living in what we're exposed to at the moment. How do we know what's happening? Our 10-year-olds are probably, because it really went up in about 2010 when 4G came on board, and then it was just smattered all over the place. We were living in it all. So our 10-year-olds are probably the first generation that are going to go through that. And a lot of them will also be brought up, you know, with, I see people on the buses, and a family will get in, parents, a little baby in a pushchair. They put a mobile phone in front of it with a video playing, then they go sit down and chat. And a lot of them would be brought up with that as well. So what next? Interesting. The other thing about this standard is it doesn't cover any of these things. Let's think about that very first one to start with, about metal. Can we bring the lights up a bit so I can see the audience for this? Because I would like to do a little bit of an experiment. If you've got any metal in your body, you're not covered by the ICNIRP standard. It excludes it, anybody with metal in their body. Okay, the first thing to think of is what amalgam fillings, that's what people first think. So if you've got amalgam filling in your hand, put your hand up. Okay, and just hold your hands up all the time, will you? And hold them high so we can see. This is a scientific survey, okay? And even if you've had them taken out, you've still got mercury in your body. So that's affecting you. So if you've had your amalgam fillings taken out, again, just go that. Okay, what about operations? Anybody with a metal hip, metal knee, motorbike accident, any pieces of metal from maybe scalp operations and things? Okay, we're getting quite a few hands up here. What about, you might not want to put your hand up, but if you've got a contraceptive coil, again, that's collecting something. Cochlear ear implants. Yeah, keep your hand up all the time, please, so that we can see how many people are excluded from this standard. Okay? Okay, you've got no metal in your body at all. What about what you're wearing on your body? Because that makes a difference as well. So if you've got pierced ears and some earrings in. For women, if you've got a metal underwired bra, that's 2 aerials. So put your hand up again. Okay, now put your hands down. Anybody didn't raise their hands, put them up. So there's one person who's got no... Are your specs metal? Are your spectacles metal?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so most of us are not covered by the official standard of the UK government. And I didn't even mention pacemakers. So if anybody's got a pacemaker, because they have also got metal inside, and their mechanism can also be affected. So thank you for being my sample for today. I think you've proven what I thought. You've proven my thesis that most of us are not covered by the standard. Now, where does that leave us? I've no idea. I'm not going to look at the other things, but it does say in the standard that it can affect electrical equipment, any electrical equipment. Yeah. A watch as well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I want to look at there are technical differences between 4G and 5G. This is why we are getting excited about it, and this is why we have to address it. You didn't see lots of talks about 4G when it came along, did you? That's because it was just the same technology as 3G and 2G, and just a little bit fancier. If you can imagine dropping a stone in a still pond, and you watch the ripples come out. I'm sure you've all done that as children and as probably as grandparents as well. And they ripple out. Yes, that's pretty much the way that 4G and 3G signals come out, except, of course, it's in 3 dimensions, so it's going all around. If you drop another stone in, then they come together, and you get that mixing of them together, and it's all disrupted, isn't it? And a third stone would do even more. So that's the way that the signals for 4G and 3G are mixing up in this room now. And we don't know what your exposure will be by the end of this talk, or by the end of the week, or your exposure is. It will be different. Because all that mixing going on, we just cannot calculate what it is. 5G is very different. 5G is a beam-forming technology. Okay, it's not like a focus beam. It's similar to a laser, similar, I suppose, to something like this, but it's a parallel beam, and it will aim a beam at any device that wants to use it. And that device may be a human being, because once it's done facial recognition on you, or recognized your glands, your pineal gland from my pineal gland, it can target that, will be able to target that as well. So that's what 5G is. It's mostly about these beams. There is a spread close to the mast itself, which is what we call the exclusion zone, where nobody should go in. And have you seen on some of those cabinets that you've got around the bottom, there's sometimes a notice. I saw one once in Wolverhampton, where I live. It was on the cabinet itself, and it said, "Do not walk past this notice." So that's the difference, and it really, what are we sitting in as we're sitting here, and what about these? How long are those children? Excuse me. How long are those kids going to be sitting in that 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 10 years? What are those kids going to come out like? I mean, we don't know. That's what I'm worried about. It's not that we know. We can make some really good guesses, of course, as you can see. But we don't know. Is that stupid? Is that dumb? I bet you've all heard about this so far as 5G is concerned, yeah? Millimeter waves, super fast, great masses of data, low latency, that means very, very fast response time. Yeah? Everybody heard about that? Yes? You can say yes, Ian, or no, Ian, yeah. That's what's being pushed out, isn't it, at the moment? What about this, though? This is at the other end, because one of the other differences between 5G and the 4G, 3G and 4G were constrained within certain frequency bands. Okay, I'm not going to get any more technical than that. 5G can cover a massive range of frequencies, including those of 3G and 4G, right up to arguably 300 gigahertz, which is very, very fast. You can't even imagine what it is. But look at what I've put there. It's faster than 4G, yeah, it should be a bit at least. It will take more data than 4G, that's certainly true as well. But notice this, it's not blocked. They've been telling you about millimeter waves. The disadvantage, though, is it gets blocked, and we're going to have to put lots and lots of masts around the place in order to stop it from being blocked by trees and rain even. I'm sure some of you have heard that. Lower frequencies, and they're what are being fed out at the moment, are not blocked. They also have a long range, many miles. I was talking to Barry Trower in the car park a while back, and I asked him the question. He said in a vacuum, it would keep going on forever. Of course, we don't have a vacuum, and it is attenuated by the atmosphere. Yeah, so, and in between those, there's a gradual change going up as the frequency increases, the range decreases, the data capacity increases, the speed increases, and the response time increases. The idea of fast response time are for things like self-driving cars. Somebody jumps out in front of the self-driving car, and you want your self-driving vehicle to stop straight away, don't you? So that's the idea. But that's a very different picture than what is being told to us in the mainstream media. And just to prove it's not me, this is from Nokia itself. A paper I found on their website some months ago. Look at the bottom one first, because that's probably the most important one in practical terms for us. Thousands of customers within hundreds of square miles with one 5G tower. Has anybody heard anybody say that before me standing on this platform? And look at the top ones, even those millimeter ones that the councils and the government are telling you don't go very far. What does it say there? Some less than a mile. That means the not some are going more than a mile, which tells me on average it's probably going to go a mile, not the 50 metres that the planning applications to the council say. But okay, Ian, I'm sure you're saying this, well, that's very nice, but does it affect us in any way? Why shouldn't we have it? So let's have a quick look about health. So I suppose the first question is, what's the difference between the natural frequencies and the ones that we're putting about at the moment? Because we've been living in natural frequencies ever since we were invented or developed or whatever, or put on the planet by some outside force some way, as we've heard all this week. Well, the natural ones are, like us, analog. Yes, we're analog beings, aren't we? We're not digitized in any way, we're analog beings. Your avatar may be digitized, but not yet. And all these anthropogenic, the person-made, the human-made ones are digital. It's a bit like the difference between going from a record deck where the needle is doing this all the time and you get that analog signal coming out, and a CD which it divides that sound wave up into little blocks. And each of those little blocks is a digit. And it's that, in a sense, that gives part of the danger, because many scientists are saying that the problem is those spikes. Each of those digits will create a little spike of radiation, every one. And the more that they are, the more, even when you're sitting down, you've got a mobile phone in your pocket or in your shirt pocket, chaps, and it has to know where you are. So it's doing what we used to call, when I started IT, polling. Where's the nearest mast? Where am I? Where's the nearest mast? Where am I? And the more you're moving, of course, it's got to do that all the time. The clue is in the name, mobile. Needs to know how to make the connection so that as soon as I make a phone call to you, you can receive it straight away, or you can text back straight away. It has to happen. That's part of the system. And so that's one of the ways that you get these pulses out, and they're the ones that are dangerous. If it's in your pocket, it's going to be radiating you all around, looking for that nearest mast. The other thing is data. Data creates pulses. It's irregular, it's random. If everybody in this room was making a phone call or a text, they would all be interrelating in some way. They'd all be crossing over one another. There's a little app down here which you can look at afterwards, which shows you just what we're sitting in this room here. Shows us all the different networks. It's not the most brilliant app in the world, but it gives you an idea. Come and have a look at it at the end of the presentation. And think about how many people are making a phone call in Glastonbury today. You know, and think of me, poor old me in Wolverhampton on the edge of the West Midlands with 250,000 people, probably most of them making streaming phone calls, texts, all the while with all their mobile phones. I was on a train the other day with a bloke who had 3 mobile phones. He did work in the industry, so at least one of them was for his work phone. So that's the difference. So is it possible that it could affect us? Is it possible? That's the only question I'm asking at the moment. But our government thinks not. Matt Warman, when he was the MP, the Minister for Everything Digital, I think he wrote this letter about 2019. Now, what that tells me, with those red words that I've highlighted there is evidence, and it is concerning. Even then, back in 2019. So, yeah. He couldn't write, there's no evidence for concern, could he? He had to put those other 2 words in. And you'll find that a lot when you read scientific articles and research papers, say there's no significant evidence for. We don't really look at that. Well, all these 3 reports come from the 1970s. And the one on the bottom left, as you look at it, that was a report by the US Navy. They had 2,300 research papers listed in that article in 1971. And on the right, the document on the right, is a report of a conference in Warsaw in 1973. and where they were discussing it. If anybody's got academic access to that, I'd really love to talk to you, because it's very expensive for me to buy it, and I can't afford it. But I'd really love to get some of the reports. I've read little bits of it. The reason, I think, boils down to us being electric. We're not only electric, of course not, but we are electric beings on an electric planet in an electric universe. If we weren't, those things wouldn't work. Those diagnostic techniques up on the screen there just wouldn't work. So the brain scan, the heart scan, and neither would these things. These are treatment methods. TENS wouldn't work if we didn't have conductive tissue in our bodies. It's been around since the mid-50s, something like that, a long time anyway. I had a client once with polio suffering, and he had one. And it helped. It made a difference to him. And I'm sure, and a lot of people, a lot of women, if I dare use that word, have said, it's okay in Glastonbury, is it? Have said during their pregnancy they found a great deal of relief from it. Not everybody, because there's a difference. Does it make sense then to say if we can use it diagnostically and we can use it therapeutically, that it couldn't possibly affect us negatively? It's never made sense to me that scientists could close their eyes to that, other than for the god of money. I want to watch a quick video. The guys at the back, you may have to change the volume on this. It's 3 people standing in front of smart meters, and it shows you the effect of blood. Alan Frey in 1970, early 70s anyway, showed that EMFs can weaken the blood-brain barrier, because he found dye that he'd put in some rats in their brain tissue, and that shouldn't have happened. Is it going to play on this computer? It's not going to play on this Macintosh. If you want to have a look at it later on, come and see me, and I'll show it to anybody on my PC, on my laptop. Okay. We didn't test that, did we, guys? That's my fault. But despite all that, we're charging ahead with all this stuff, aren't we? They are. Well, that's the motivation that we've looked at there. Now, first of all, you remember I was going to show you something, a sentence. I did show it to you, didn't I? That sentence from a planning application. This is the rest of it. Centralized control with street infrastructure, and they can add other structures to that. Then there's another sentence, and you'll notice what it says here. 5G is basic technology. Basic technology. You've seen nothing yet. And I'm reading stuff which talks about radio access networks. Look up Amazon Sidewalk when you get home. Do a search on Amazon Sidewalk, and that's what's spreading over the whole. We would have called it a mesh of radiation across everything. It will come into your home. It's part of this Internet of Things. When as soon as you take some cheese out of your fridge, you don't put it back for half an hour. The fridge thinks, oh, they're going to use it all, I'll order some more. And then a drone comes flying by in the next half hour and plonks some cheese on your table. Yes, no human being will be in the way. So yes, and you'll notice the other thing I like about this sentence is the last bit of it. If we don't have 5G, we can't do it. That's why I focus on planning applications and stopping those masks from going up. More of that later. This is the final 3 of those sentences where they bring in climate change, of course. So that tells me 3 things. You know, the climate change is behind it, or climate emergency is behind it. 5G is just the start of it, and there's an agenda. You know, those 3 things. One of one of the side benefits I've noticed about working with planning applications is that I'm learning a lot about what's going on. I mean, okay, it took me 60 pages of boring reading to find some of them, but it's worthwhile. This is Oxford. And you notice those notices there. They're going to raise these. You've seen these metal raising things up, have you? And so if you're in a city, you have as well. And notice it's all about charges. Charges apply, and there's so much writing on these two notices. Anybody driving through is not going to notice. And if they read them, they're going to have an accident, aren't they? And it says rising bollard. Okay, thank you. Rising bollard, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. What if your delivery has a hitch and you don't get out before 10 o'clock? What happens then? What if there's an incident in there, in one of the shops, a fire engine's got to come? How quickly can they get those bollards down? I was stuck on a train once which finished in Victoria Station on the wrong platform that it wasn't supposed to be on. Nobody could open the doors for about 10 minutes. We all had to wait. Yeah? These things are happening now. It's about these things, isn't it? Andy spoke about AI very eloquently the other day. I agree with everything he put in it there. Digital ID, all sorts of things. No is going to be the default answer. If you ask me, can I do so-and-so, my implication is going to be say, yeah, of course you can. Let's work out how we can do it. AI, not like that. It will say, no, prove you deserve it. And this will be one of the ways it uses it. This is your digital wallet. It's not about money. Again, following on what Torb said a few minutes ago, it's about you. It's a digital you now, not just a birth certificate. It's going to be a digital you as opposed to the analog you. About everything. They've covered just about everything. One night I'd been looking at this and smart cities. This is Paris's idea with my additions in green. And yeah, I was getting a little bit frustrated at that time. So let's talk about what we can do. Just to finish off for these last 10 minutes or so. Well, anybody got one of these? It's a doorbell, by the way. Yeah, somebody, yeah. If I asked the crowd in Birmingham or Wolverhampton, most hands would go up. Nobody's got one. I did just a couple of people. Yeah. It's one of those bells that's got a video, and you go up and you can talk to somebody inside with a video. It's a surveillance tool. And people who are buying them, I recognise this is a very intelligent audience. People who are buying them are actually paying to have their data sent to somebody else who's then selling it. Dumb or what? And the reason I know it's collecting data, whoops, that's the wrong thing. That's the one I want to press. It's not my. As you can see, can you read that? It says history. This is the app that you get with your smart doorbell, and it says history. Now, being an IT programmer years ago, I know that it can't give you a history unless it's collecting data. It's that simple. It's that simple. The argument is that simple. And it's probably getting more data, more useful data, than the cameras on the traffic lights in the traffic junctions, because it's got a radius. Most of these have got a radius about 15 meters. So if your house is more than 15 meters close to the pavement, anybody walking by chatting is recorded on it. There's also, of course, a data protection element in there. And a couple of years ago, somebody was fined for breaching data protection laws with one of these that he was pointing at his neighbour's garden. Okay, he went a bit over the top, but nonetheless. And this is not the only thing that is doing that. Alexa, Fitbit. Anybody got Fitbit on? I hope not. It's killing you. And it's collecting your data at the same time. So many, all of those things, anything. The watch that people pay at the checkout, those things, they're all collecting data and they're all radiating you as well. And one of these is probably listening to you whilst you're in your home as well, if it's got a 15-metre radius as well. So stop buying them. And I gather from this audience, and not many of you have bought them anyway, but talk to your friends and your neighbours. If you've got a neighbour who's got one, go and say, you're breaching my rights. Data protection. You haven't asked me if you can record me every time I walk past your front door to get to my door. So talk to people about those things, because they need to know. Most people are quite innocently buying these things, thinking, oh, it's a nice swanky thing. Yeah, I'll have that. It's useful, of course. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is too much to pay. I've been saying a couple of times that I'm focusing on objections to planning masks, and you've heard some of the reasons why. And we can do it. It's working. In England, in the last 2 years, the average approval rate of a 5G mast has been about 40%. That means 60% have either been withdrawn or refused. Now, bearing in mind, we all started on this path 2.5 years ago or something like that, we're doing bloody good, really. And this is why we do it. It does work. And you can also, apart from objecting to the planning applications, you can also write letters. There's all sorts of things you can write. And I was talking to somebody, there's an international lawyer in the room today who came up to me and said that she's got exactly the paperwork that we need. So I'm hoping to work with her later on. So that would be really, really good. But these things are working. And if they're not, they're educating people as well. If a councillor receives a letter saying, well, you could be liable if you're part of a decision to put a mast in your street, they're going to start thinking. And in fact, in the last couple of months, I've met about 5 or 6 people that I didn't know before, councillors, who are on our side. And I do think there are some people in the planning offices who are also supportive of us. Little hints come that way. So these things are working. They are really important to do. And you know, I sometimes call this the down and dirty talk, because you can actually get up and do stuff. You know, it's not just about listening. If you sit on your ass, we're going to get nowhere. Everybody in this room needs to get on board with this. Everybody. And this is one of the reasons. This text came through yesterday from a friend of mine in Derbyshire. They've got a mast in their village. Keep talking to the councillors. Coventry councillors, a team down there working with me, they had a letter from one of the councillors saying, thank you for what you're doing. You're making us aware of what's happening. So slowly, slowly, we're having an effect. So it's really good doing that, because it's a bit like weeding the garden, isn't it? You can see the result, you know, and if you put in some objections and a mast is refused, you think, yay. It's not 100%, of course it's not yet anyway, but we're working on it. So some quick conclusions then. We've all got to do our thinking. I'm sure a lot of you here do, but we've really got to do even more. We've got to up our game and think even more, outside the box. If you've not read any of the research, follow some of those links that I put, the piece of papers down here, and start looking at research about health effects. There's masses and masses of it up there. If you just use Google, you'll get all the no. There's no harm whatsoever. Not James Lynn, Narendra Singh, and oh God, what's his name gone? They did a research where they looked at the funding, and once they looked at the funding, they found that the industry-funded results showed 70% no harm, no significant harm. 30% showed significant harm. Independent studies was exactly the opposite way round. So money counts. So read some independent research. The BMJ actually has had some good articles, some reasonable articles recently, but there are places, and you can also get in touch with me, that's on the leaflet as well. So we've got to question things. Whoops, we've got to question things. Ask for evidence. You know, think about that example of Texel. I showed you Texel Island, where they leaped to this conclusion without much of a thought. So question everything. Even question yourselves. Educate. This is really important because we are educating the counsellors as we go along. Work together. It's much easier doing things together with a little local team than it is on your own. And again, I can help you with that. And remember, we need to be more afraid of what will happen if we don't do anything than we are if we do something.